Welcome to the Pardesh channel. Today we explain Numbers chapter 25 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're looking at a text that features a really sudden, dramatic shift from a state of total peace to a devastating plague. And right in the middle of it all is the story of one single man who stepped in to stop it. It's an intense, incredibly pivotal moment in the historical narrative of this text, and we're going to unpack exactly what happened, going right through it verse by verse.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for this explainer. We'll start with the historical context, walk verse by verse through the sin at Peor, analyze the zeal of Phinehas, look at the Midianite aftermath, and finally, distill the key ideas and life lessons.
All right, Section 1, Hook and Historical Context. Let's set the stage.
So, opening up chapter 25, right at verse 1, the Israelites are camped in a place called Shittim. Now, this location is absolutely crucial for understanding the gravity of what's about to unfold. Shittim is situated on the plains of Moab, just east of the Jordan River. So, geographically and chronologically, the people of Israel are standing quite literally right on the doorstep of the Promised Land. Think about it. They have survived decades of harsh wandering in the wilderness, and the finish line is finally in sight. But right here, at this climactic moment, the narrative takes a really dark turn. The verse plainly states that the Israelite men began to indulge in sexual immorality with the local Moabite women. It begins as a crossing of physical boundaries, a failure of personal and collective discipline in a new foreign environment, which ultimately paves the way for a much, much deeper catastrophe.
Moving right into Section 2, the sin at Peor. This is where we see a total spiritual rebellion.
What starts as a physical temptation rapidly snowballs into a complete spiritual collapse. Reading further into verses 2 and 3, the Moabite women actively invite the Israelite men to participate in the sacrifices to their local gods. And the wild part? The Israelites accept the invitation. The text is totally clear here. The people ate and bowed down before these gods. To really understand this, we have to look at the ancient world. Back then, eating the meat from a communal sacrifice was never just a meal. It was a profound act of fellowship, loyalty, and worship. That physical immorality directly opened the door to spiritual rebellion. By participating in these feasts, Israel joined in worshiping the local deity, directly violating the most fundamental commandment of their covenant. Because of this tremendous betrayal, the Lord's anger burned against Israel.
To fully grasp the magnitude of this betrayal, we need to clarify what exactly they were worshiping. The Baal of Peor refers to the local deity, or idol, venerated by the Moabites in the specific geographic region of Peor. The Hebrew phrasing in the text implies a binding or yoking together. So, by eating the sacrificial meals and bowing down, the Israelites were wrongfully attaching themselves to a foreign, pagan god. And this wasn't some hidden, quiet sin happening in the shadows. No way. It was a blatant, highly visible abandonment of their core national identity and their exclusive covenant with God, and it was unfolding right out in the open.
In verses 4 and 5, we see the immediate, severe judicial response to this mass rebellion. First, God commands Moses to take all the leaders of these people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord. The specific Hebrew concept here of exposing them in daylight emphasizes total public accountability. The text explicitly states this was necessary so that the Lord's fierce anger might turn away from Israel. Basically, a public daylight punishment was mandated for a highly public sin. Following this divine directive, Moses issues a command to the judges of Israel saying, "Each of you must put to death those of your men who have joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor." It is a moment of absolute national crisis, demanding strict, unflinching accountability to save the nation from just complete destruction.
Section 3. The zeal of Phinehas. A definitive response.
Right in the middle of this intense national crisis, verse 6 describes a scene of just unbelievable audacity. An Israelite man brings a Midianite woman to his family, parading her right before the eyes of Moses and the entire assembly of Israel. Consider what the assembly was doing at that exact moment. They were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. They were mourning, totally overwhelmed by a divine plague that had broken out among the camp as a direct result of the idolatry at Peor. Yet, amidst this profound national tragedy, while everyone is literally weeping at their holiest site, this individual brazenly flaunts his sin in front of the entire community and leadership. It is an act of sheer, unparalleled defiance.
Now, verses 7 and 8 outline the incredibly swift response to this. A man named Phinehas witnesses this desecration. The text carefully identifies his lineage for us. He's the son of Eleazar and the grandson of Aaron, the high priest. This means Phinehas is a priest, someone wholly dedicated to the holy service of God. Let's trace his exact actions, step by step. Point 1. He sees the brazen act and immediately leaves the paralyzed, weeping assembly. Point 2. He takes a spear in his hand. Point 3. He follows the Israelite man directly into the inner part of his tent. And point 4. He drives the spear right through both of them, through the Israelite man and into the woman's body. It's a rapid, forceful, and totally unflinching response designed to immediately cut off an unprecedented public desecration.
And the immediate consequence of this decisive action is stated so plainly at the end of verse 8. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped. Phinehas' drastic, targeted action directly resulted in halting the devastating divine punishment that was actively ravaging the community. His intervention basically served as a circuit breaker, immediately neutralizing the threat to the nation.
But man, the cost was already staggering. Verse 9 hits us with this stark number, 24,000. That's how many Israelites died in the plague. What's truly sobering about this number is the sheer scale it represents. To put that into perspective, it forces us to realize that the worship of the Baal of Peor wasn't just an isolated incident involving a handful of people. It was a massive, systemic failure that swept through the camp and brought tremendous, wide-scale tragedy to the community before it was finally halted.
In verses 10 and 11, God speaks directly to Moses, evaluating what just happened, and God validates Phinehas' action in the strongest possible terms. God declares that Phinehas turned his anger away from the Israelites, stating, "For he was as zealous as I am for my honor among them, so that in my zeal I did not put an end to them." The text makes it absolutely clear that Phinehas wasn't just acting out of uncontrolled rage, vigilantism, or personal vengeance. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. His action is framed as a perfect alignment with God's own desire to protect the holiness and integrity of the covenant community.
Because of this righteous alignment, verses 12 and 13 outline a profound reward. God commands Moses to announce that he is making a covenant of peace with Phinehas. Furthermore, Phinehas and his descendants are granted a covenant of a lasting priesthood. The text explicitly states the underlying reason for this eternal reward, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites. By stopping the desecration, Phinehas essentially covered over the sin of the nation. His singular act of intense loyalty secured peace for the surviving nation and cemented a permanent, elevated role for his lineage.
Now, what's incredibly revealing about this moment are the specific identities of the two people in the tent, which are finally named for us in verses 14 and 15. The Israelite man was Zimri, a prominent leader of a Simeonite family. The Midianite woman was Cosbi, the daughter of Zor, who was a tribal chief of a Midianite family. This was absolutely not a random encounter between two ordinary commoners. The specific naming of these individuals shows us that the corruption, the idolatry, and the blatant defiance had reached the absolute highest levels of tribal leadership. It was a highly visible top-down compromise that threatened to rot the nation from its head.
Section 4. The Midianite Aftermath. Shifting Relations.
Wrapping up the chapter in verses 16 through 18, God gives a very clear, uncompromising directive to Moses. Treat the Midianites as enemies and kill them. The text immediately provides the specific justification for this command, too. It says, because they treated you as enemies when they deceived you in the affair of Peor and their sister Cosbi. The narrative establishes that the Midianites weren't merely passive bystanders here. They actively and deliberately weaponized temptation, using deception to orchestrate the spiritual and physical downfall of the Israelites. Therefore, the relationship had to fundamentally shift to one of outright hostility.
Section 5. Key Ideas and Clarifications. Let's break down some of the core concepts we've uncovered.
If you step back, the entire chapter is really built upon a massive narrative contrast. On one side of this equation, we have the broad, sweeping unfaithfulness of the multitude. Thousands of Israelite men gave in to foreign temptations and participated in blatant idolatry, leading to a catastrophic plague. But on the other side, standing entirely alone, we have the distinct faithfulness of just one man, Phinehas. His single decisive action protected the community's covenant and literally stopped the destruction in its tracks. The text perfectly balances the devastating, contagious power of collective sin against the incredible saving power of individual integrity.
We also need to clearly understand the concept of zeal, which is really the central pivot of this whole chapter. Based purely on the simple narrative text we just walked through, zeal here is defined as a decisive, passionate action taken to protect God's honor and the community from destruction, specifically in the face of blatant public defiance.
It's crucial to recognize that biblical zeal in this context is not about lawlessness or anarchy. It is about stepping up to vigorously enforce the established boundaries of the community when the leadership is paralyzed, the laws are being mocked openly, and the entire community is under an immediate existential threat.
Finally, Section 6, Life Lessons and our recap. How do we apply this? This historical account offers several profound practical insights that apply directly to how we maintain our own integrity today. First, it really highlights the severe danger of compromising your core values when you're situated in a foreign, new, or challenging environment, just as Israel was vulnerable on the plains of Shittim. Second, the text clearly traces how seemingly simple physical temptations often serve as a gateway, leading directly to a complete spiritual and moral downfall. Small compromises rarely stay small. And third, perhaps most importantly, it showcases the profound impact of one solitary person. When the crowd goes wrong, and even the leaders fail, one person taking a decisive, uncompromising stand for what is right can literally alter the course of events and save a community. So to completely solidify this in our memory, here's a quick start-to-finish recap of chapter 25. The narrative begins with the Israelites falling into physical and spiritual sin at Shittim, intertwining with Moabite women and worshipping the Baal of Peor. This mass betrayal triggers a severe divine plague and a command from Moses to execute the guilty leaders. Then, right at the height of this weeping crisis, Zimri, an Israelite leader, brazenly parades a Midianite princess into the camp. Phinehas acts with immediate zeal, executing them both with a spear. This singular action stops the plague, which had already claimed 24,000 lives. For his loyalty, Phinehas is rewarded with a permanent covenant of peace and priesthood. And finally, the chapter concludes with God commanding Israel to treat the Midianites as enemies for their deliberate orchestration of the deception.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought, based on the steadfast actions of Phinehas. How will you stand firm in your values when the crowd goes the other way? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.